I'm Tom McFadyen. I'll do a quick intro and then introduce our guest of honor. McFadyen Digital is a system integration company that's been building enterprise-scale B2B marketplaces and B2C and e-commerce solutions for 25 years. We've served over 10% of the Fortune 500, a couple hundred e-commerce and marketplace professionals around the US, Brazil, and India.
Hey everyone, I'm Mike Powers. I'm the head of digital and e-commerce for the Alaska Rubber Group. Previous to the Alaska Rubber Group, I was the head of e-com for a GNC and distributor in upstate New York called Taylor Marks. So today I'm going to be coming to you from the angle of a practitioner in a distribution business. So thanks for your time.
Thanks for being here with us.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. Appreciate it.
So I have 7 minutes to tell you all the strategies for winning e-commerce out of the gate. I'm going to fail at that, but at least I've got 5 more minutes than the horses running around the Kentucky Derby. So that's the analogy we're going to be talking about in the 6 segments or categories of e-commerce strategy and technology, requirements, implementation, operation, and optimization that we'll go through. You don't have to necessarily be the biggest guy or the first one to the race. This example here, Rich Stripe, this horse found out 30 seconds before the close of the horses to win to race in the race for the Kentucky Derby that he had a chance to win. But let's start with the first section of topics for strategy. So this is a checklist, and we're going to go through 6 different slides of this. And if you want to copy this, feel free to shoot an email out to info@mcfadyen.com. Happy to send this to you with some more information, more detailed information. But there are a lot of elements that are important to consider. Are you a distributor or a manufacturer? The business models are going to be different. What are some of your KPIs for success? Defining that up front is important in getting the proper buy-in. One thing we'll talk about later is your value add, your differentiation. If you're just moving boxes around, it's hard to compete in the days of Amazon and other B2B high volume players. So adding that value add service is very important. A lot of different financial models, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, and different considerations from your organizational design, channel conflict, collaboration, or channel shift amongst your channel ecosystem, and how sophisticated is your internal IT team? Are you going to just, like Boston, pave the cow paths and continue doing what you've been doing for years or decades? Or are you going to be like New York City and define a whole new business process and come up with a grid system for your streets? So coming out of the gate, you have to also look at your requirements. So what are some of the elements that are obviously above a B2C business requirements? There's certainly a lot of elements, so purchasing list, recurring orders, contract pricing, customer-specific catalogs, approval workflows or organizational modeling, creating those account hierarchies within your business. Credit terms, the session we're just in was about credit terms and consolidating the invoicing for procurement business models, allocating to cost centers, split shipments, a lot of different unique fulfillment side requirements there. And same with pricing, tiered pricing, cost plus, MSRP minus, max and minimum order quantities. A lot of these requirements, again, not common in B2C, but unique to B2B. RFQ or configured price quote, CPQ requirements. Certainly a lot of tools to add on to your commerce system for that, or maybe you already have some. Expanding internationally, including multi-site if you have different fulfillment tags or even brands under which you sell your products. And certainly there's different shipping requirements in the B2B space compared to B2C. If you're shipping a truckload of hazardous chemicals, it's very different than shipping a t-shirt to somebody. So picking the right technology can be acronym soup of different products. Of course, the e-commerce platform is the one most people think about when you think about technology for digital commerce, and there are different philosophies around that. So the legacy monolith companies from back in the early days when we were starting, it was ATG and Webster Commerce and Hybris, some of the more SaaS platforms like Salesforce having a conference going on now, VTech's also having a conference going on now, and Adobe has a great PaaS or on-premise solution with Magento Commerce. But lots of different philosophies on which is best for you. Some of that depends on how tech savvy your internal organization is, your culture, how much you want to extend your business versus use more of a cookie cutter SaaS platform, or build something from scratch with like a mock architecture approach. And the words in the cloud can mean all kinds of different spectrum of things. So somebody's saying they're cloud, everybody's going to say that, but you really have to dig into it. Is it SaaS, PaaS, DaaS? How much of it is extendable? How many APIs are available via GraphQL, microservices, et cetera? How cloud native are some of those infrastructures versus just, copying an on-prem software product into AWS? So again, the acronym soup, most of you are probably familiar with OMS, PIM, MDM, CMS, CDP, CRM, marketing automation, a lot of different tools here. We don't have time to really dig into all these, but there are certainly lots of sessions, and each of these could be a day or two long conference in itself. Implementation, when you get off to the races here, again, it depends on your approach. It would depend on how tech savvy your organization is. Some of these bigger companies, like we heard with Grainger, have dozens or hundreds of IT teammates working internally to build something. Some are not so tech savvy and want to outsource more of that to a system integrator like McFadyen Digital. There are different philosophies in the approach as well. Do you want to have a rapidly iterative agile approach, or more of the legacy waterfall approach, or hybrid of agile, waterfall, and agile? Are you going to do iterative small launches? Sometimes organizations will do that. We're going to move the cart, then we're going to move the catalog, then we're going to move some of the UX. We're going to go to headless first, then go full, replace the back end. Or do you need to go big bang? Usually a bit more risky, but some organizations need that. So when you're running your horse, there's certainly some considerations. Your organization, how are you going to structure commissions for the B2B sellers, and conflict with the online digital channel? What are your SLAs for shipping to your customers, or even your IT systems SLAs? How are you going to monitor that? How are you going to measure some of these new digital offerings that you have? And then once you're kind of getting to the finish line, you need to optimize and repeat, rinse and repeat. Unfortunately, it's a constantly changing process of getting better and better and better at your race. So you expand to new channels. We'll talk a little bit about that. What are some of the metrics you want to leverage? How are you going to tune your business with those KPIs and really optimize it? Can you get into the advanced stages of predictive analytics, where it starts telling you what you should be doing, not just what you did in the past? Enhanced automation. There's a constant user experience redesign process that's going on. It's never one and done, and you can say, we're complete with our UX design, you don't have to do that anymore. Fulfillment optimization, constantly getting better and better at that, as the competition certainly is investing in that. But the one thing I'd like to leave you with is that there's not going to be just one winner in B2B. Much like at the races, there's never just one winner. Sometimes it's going to be that long shot, like Rich Strike at Kentucky Derby, won at 80-1 odds. Sometimes it's a bigger guy who may be more expected to win, like early voting at the Preakness. This Saturday, let's see who wins. I lost some money on one of the horses at Preakness, so hopefully nobody loses money on this one. But it's, again, never really one winner for all of these. In the, I think, almost 150 years of the three races, the Triple Crown's only been won 13 times. So lots of opportunity for lots of vendors. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Tom. Mike, you have been around the block, my friend. You are the soothsayer, the all-doer who's done many, many things. So getting e-commerce right from the gate. I mean, there's two ways to look at that. Either you're starting from scratch, or you've identified what you need to do to kind of grow here. So that's two different ways of winning from the gate. You've done both. What's the difference? And can you talk about the experience that each one has to go through?
So it's funny, day one, or you have the executive team dinner the night before your first day, or you go out to lunch and you sit down at your desk and you're like, okay, what do we do, right? That's the first thing. For me, I've had the experience of having both a top-down and bottom-up approach. So in my first go at it, our largest customer came to us and said, or the reason for me coming on board for this distributor was our largest customer that almost represented 20 to 30% of our revenue said, if you don't have online ordering, we're going to have to move away from you. So I will tell you, having your customer come to you, not necessarily the top-down approach. I will tell you that internal adoption took a little bit longer. I'm in a situation now, here in 2021, 2022, I work for an employee-owned company where the board looks at B2B e-commerce as launching looking at it as launching a physical branch. It's a digital branch, but we got to look at it that way. So yeah, I've done both approaches. What you need to do day one is to identify ERPs, technology, the technology stack that's currently implemented. And then also, you know, for me, resources like Digital Commerce 360, right? There's technology pieces, there's information and market research that will tell you, you know, who is winning in B2B e-commerce. And for me, it's also networking. Go to your ERP, you know, when I got my jump in this, Infor SXE had a user group. Or DDI, our ERP vendor now, brings together their customer, ask questions, introduce yourself on LinkedIn to your counterpart, and learn who's winning in the space. Those are the two, you know, that's some of the things I've done in my role in both, you know, a top-down or a bottom-up approach.
Yeah, and thanks for the plug. I'll give you that $50 I promised you after the session here.
There's a few others I could have mentioned.
So this is your conference. This is your session here. We call it boot camp for a reason, because people often struggle to find the right resources to go to answer basic questions on where do I start, what do I need to think about, what should I avoid, what do I need to get right. So, Mike, one of the things that I think is overlooked with any kind of startup, or let's say going from startup to kind of phase 1, phase 2, is benchmarking the competition. And I don't think a lot of companies do that. So is that a good practice? And if so, what are you supposed to learn from seeing what they have that you don't?
Listen, for us, I think the first area we looked at in the organization was product data. Looking at MSC, Fastenal, Grainger, Applied, we realized that if we're going to do any type of B2B e-commerce strategy, we need to make sure that the 50,000 SKUs on our website were fully enriched. And, you know, looking at the competition, these teams, these folks have large digital teams. Distributors typically don't have a large internal technology team. They may have an IT manager running the B2B e-commerce strategy. When you look at some of those folks, we realized pretty quickly in both the JSAN business industry I was in, as well as the hose and fitting industry I'm in now, let's start with let's focus on the product data to make sure that we can get that online, but also in our ERP. Pretty important.
Tom, what are some of the most common mistakes that either a startup needs to either learn from and not make, or, you know, they're started and now it's time to ramp up? But what are the mistakes to avoid is my question for you.
Well, we mentioned earlier having a unique differentiation. So a real a core value to the customer. If you're just moving boxes, you're going to get displaced. Amazon, B2B, or somebody else is going to move boxes better than you. That can't be your only differentiator. Mike has a great moat you've talked about. I'll explain a couple others. It can be your product configurator. It can be some of your unique knowledge about a specific industry. Your locations where you can serve your customers. So something that's going to really differentiate you. Of course, you've got to get the fundamentals of moving boxes around. That's table stakes, but that's not going to win the game. You have to be differentiated, have a unique value opportunity. You mentioned a great one, Mike, earlier today.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing that. I mean, we've talked about the fact in the hose and fitting space, the transaction or the transfer of knowledge, asking questions and solving problems is happening behind over a counter, right? Somebody walks in with a broken hose with 2 fittings and says, hey, this broke. Can we fix this? In my current role, what we're trying to do is make that conversation or transaction behind the counter basically happen on our website, because we are selling widgets and components right now. So that's the example we had discussed earlier. But again, let's take it back to the beginning. It's imperative that in any strategy, and I'm speaking from a practitioner of a distribution business, that you understand that our ERP is our world, right? So I need to understand if I'm offering any type of B2B e-commerce offering, and B2B e-commerce to me is the local branch availability and pricing, customer-specific pricing. I need to make sure that API is going to be able to give my customers what they need in regards to that information.
All right. Another example you used was how critical it is getting the right hose. It's not, you're gonna have a garden hose at Home Depot. If it's the wrong hose, somebody dies.
Yeah, so we have folks up on the north sound of Alaska, where if you have a hose or a fitting go on an oil rig, it's really bad, right? So the fact of the matter is, if you're lacking product data, specifications, temperature, size, temperature, application, media, there's a lot of information that if you're selling a product online, we need to make sure that information is there. And then if we're thinking about giving a CPQ offering, well, that rules engine in the back needs to be pretty powerful. But again, the CPQ offering for us is kind of the phase 2. In our industry, there's not many distributors that are offering e-commerce. And it's been wild for me to see that if we're able to listen to the customer, survey the customer, meet with our internal stakeholders, and then as a team kind of go about this with our strategy, we're in a really good shape right now.
All right, so I mean, come on folks, this is boot camp, and we're here with the experts to kind of answer questions. I can ask them the live long day, but feel free. If something's on your mind you want to talk about, sir? Yeah.
Hi, I work for ITW, part of, or Magnaflux, part of ITW, but what role does the manufacturer play in providing that data to you and the customer, right? Because whose responsibility is it, and how should it be focused
or maintained? Right? Like who owns that, right? We had a conversation yesterday with a very probably the largest manufacturer in our space. And the conversation was really about, we need rich product information, and it's that transferring of the data. And then, let's be honest, we have manufacturers that are coming to us saying, we need help with enrichment. We have PDFs, we have catalogs, but we don't have it in a digital format, right? But for the ones that do, I still believe that some manufacturers are worried about giving their data away. How is it going to look on the website? And in my current role, we are actually working with our largest manufacturers because we're going to be sharing this data across our industry associations. Because we all know manufacturers have been waiting a long time for distributors to get serious about e-commerce. Many of them have their own Amazon B2B, Amazon business websites. So we're raising our hand and being proactive and say, hey, let's work together. Use some of your resources, our resources, and let's get your product data into a PIM. We'll give you access, we'll get access, and that's really from a homegrown strategy, what we've been doing.
And there are multiple tiers of the data as well. There's the regulatory compliance, you have to have MSDS sheets for your products, to the optimize your conversion rate by having the best enriched merchandise text for SEO in Google and others. And then sometimes it may be fitment, as you said,
yes,
specific product for this use case or this application, which again can be a real differentiator in your industry.
And listen, the maturity level with some of the large retailers you have here is phenomenal. But I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of manufacturers that are still trying to get their head around how do we do this? How do we get product data? How do we engage with our distribution network? And not only just give them, digital assets, SDS sheets, but how do we work with them consistently to update? If we have a new brand or a rebranding strategy, well, you have 15,000 items on the website that now have to be changed. I don't have anybody in the four walls of our distribution business that can do that. Let's develop that partnership. So those are some of the tactics that we've been doing.
There's an old friend of ours that we've been reporting on for many, many years. He's not here with us today, but he works for a 100-year-old distribution company. They know their space. They're, I don't know, maybe 10 states, 10 branches, something like that. And 15 years ago, he said, we should do e-commerce. And he said at a board meeting. Mm-hmm. And the CEO said, okay, great, you're in charge. So thus began how this particular company began to go down the e-commerce path. But you know what? This person had nary a clue as to what a strategy should entail. And I think some folks are here in the exact same position. So can we talk about the best practices for making sure that the strategy that you want to do with anything digital or e-commerce or both is going to be the right fit for your particular organization? So that's general, I know, but what are some best practices that we all can use if we're just getting started?
Certainly, you mentioned baseline and comparing the competition, and it has to be fairly similar industry. So, for example, if you're targeting certain average order value, looking at some companies that the industry average maybe $50 orders, some that may be a $10,000 average order. So benchmarking your competition and what others are out there, but also I think looking at innovative new business models that are coming out, like marketplaces is a core area of us, and that's really transforming the industry with new underlying business model economics that are leading to a lot of the biggest companies in the world in terms of e-commerce are almost all of them, 9 out of 10 are operating marketplaces. So certainly the business model economics is a transformative area.
What's your best practice, Mike?
So my best practice, and it comes down to 3 silos, right? It's about customer adoption, getting revenue, getting new revenue from existing customers, new revenue from new customers, and then organizational efficiencies. And I think this was something that Brian Beck had talked about, but I'll tell you that, talking to your customer and the customer adoption is extremely important, right? So when I say surveying your top customers, have their voice come to the executive table so it's not just coming from you, right? Let them tell your board and your executive team the other websites that they're using, because it's happening, right? We know that the distributors that do not have e-commerce, they think their customers love them, and they do, but that long tail, that bottom tail, those customers are going elsewhere and they're not telling them. So let that customer be a voice and actually say, bring them to the table. We're launching a B2B e-commerce website for you. Please tell us what you like. I can't tell you using a Google survey. Literally, you could even start with a Google survey. Send it out to your customers. You will get a ton of feedback. Your customer service is the best, but I haven't been ordering from you because I can't order online. Here's my favorites list, saved cart, order approval process. They will open up and tell you exactly what they want from you in that strategy.
Sir, you have a question?
Yeah, we're a distributor, just as you are. We have probably 200 or so vendors. We have 30,000 SKUs online. And those manufacturers give us their video, their images, their PDFs, all their information. How do you go about marketing to your customer that this is you helping them and not the manufacturer helping? If you got 2 similar things or solutions for that customer, how do you say, we can help you with this, and we can help you with this, and the manufacturer's kind of out of it, and the customer doesn't think, oh, this is just the manufacturer's product, but this is your product?
Yeah, I think you can start. I have some idea. So what we did, and we're going to be doing it at Alaska Rubber Group, is we were creating dedicated brand pages, featured brand pages for manufacturers. So on the header of your website, you have a drop down, and there's like 15. Those are your E1 or your preferred vendors. And what we would do is work with them to take over some of their generic marketing material. Maybe have their brochures, SDS sheets, any type of information, but also have maybe some YouTube channel, YouTube videos. What we do on those pages, though, is spotlight or feature the top products from them that we sell. We also have folks in our team that might do a product spotlight on it. So it's not the manufacturer video, it's us creating a page so that if a customer lands on there and says, hey, listen, I'm not familiar with Fill-Rite. What does Fill-Rite do? Well, they're looking at a branch manager basically on the road installing one, right? And so a light customer, and that's the other thing, is doing a customer segmentation project where you can basically create market baskets, generic market baskets for these customers, so that when Fill-Rite has a dedicated landing page, you're not throwing up their entire product catalog, you're putting their top 5 products, right? And some generic information, and you're not driving that customer to the Fill-Rite manufacturer website, you're keeping them right there on that website. So they're still searching your product catalog. If they want to bounce out, they can do that as well. But keeping them there, but at least showing or spotlighting that vendor. And on the flip side, on a quarterly basis, sharing KPIs and analytics. This is with the manufacturer. This is how many people are coming to your product. This is how many people have purchased. Here are how much revenue is coming from new customers of your products. And when you start sharing that data with them, those co-op dollars start coming your way. And you can start investing in other ways, other digital marketing strategies. That's something we've done in our business.
That's what I was going to say. Content is king. Having the content is helpful, either the manufacturers or your own that you create. But to enable that, there are certain tools that can certainly help. So CMS and DAM, content management systems, or digital asset management systems, certainly help you manage that content. And once you've got the assets there, then leveraging that for the best SEO, so that you as a distributor, you show up on the Google search site instead of the manufacturers. It's a partnership, but it's also a bit of a competition sometimes to drive that organic search traffic to your site for the transaction.
When do you know when to stick to the timeline that you create internally versus when it goes out the window, depending upon how the technology rollout is going, versus the strategy rollout, versus the user, what have you? So, I mean, things change. E-commerce dynamics. Things happen. So, I guess my question is, if folks are developing either a startup strategy, they want to win right from the gate, as our title implies here, or they're kind of ramping up. Can you talk about the timeline, expectations? What should work when, and when do you kind of fall back to regroup if you have to?
From a distributor standpoint, when the decision's made to do B2B e-commerce, you can evaluate whether your ERP has an offering, such as Magento or their own homegrown e-commerce solution. But if you decide to go in a different direction and you're going to be going out to the marketplace, please have a conversation with the ERP and tell them what your strategy is. I've lived through this most recently, where if the ERP, the API that needs to connect with the e-commerce website, if it's not fully developed or it's lacking, that can blow up any timeline you have. So originally when I was in the Janssen business with Infor, we wanted to go live in 12 months, we pretty much hit that deadline. Most recently, my goal was to probably get that website live in 9 to 12 months. Well, we were hitting month number 9. Our e-commerce vendor was 95% done with mapping to our ERP API when our ERP raised their hand and said, guys, unfortunately, you're pulling us in a way that we need to open ourselves up to allow customers to choose other vendors other than ourselves. You can't use that API that you're about to go live with, and that's hitting month 10. So this is a real life example of us pulling along our ERP vendor, and we have a great relationship with them, but we were really pulling them along where they raised their hand and said, you can't scrap that, we've hired folks to work on this, and it added 8 months.
Okay, yeah.
So we're talking 18 months now to get this live. So do me a favor, as soon as you make the decision, you get the green light, go. If you're a distributor or if you have any other really important technology stacks in your business, please have a conversation, bring them to the table. Whether you don't have to give time frames, but at least get them into the loop and let them know where you're going, because you need to have that conversation. And that was a painful one. And listen, I had experience with the Janssen distributor, and I told you we had 30% of our total revenue coming through, and we had great conversations, and we took that tribal knowledge to this ERP vendor, and unfortunately, I think they heard us, but didn't realize that we were serious. So do me a favor, set that meeting, talk to them and tell them we're doing this. Give me the API documentation, and are you guys thinking about enhancing or improving it? So I'll stop there.
By the way, Mike is low key about this stuff. So Tom, what you see?
So we provide both strategy advisory services as well as the technology implementation. And usually in the strategy or advisory stage, we look at like 1 to 2 months depending on what needs to be done. So, and that can range from business model definition, ROI, budget planning, KPI definition, and including tech stack selection. So going out and deciding which vendor you're going to use for e-commerce, or if you need a CMS or PIM or OMS or other elements of your infrastructure acronym soup. On the technology side, depending on the product selected and the scale of the business, from let's say a $10 to $100 million company, it may be 4 or 6 months to a year to implement. Once we get into our clients that are in the $1 to $10 billion of online revenue range, it's usually 1 to 2 years for an implementation, replatforming, and above 10 billion of online, we've got one client that's like a 2 to 3 year implementation. Or most typically at that point, it's a replatforming, because you already have obviously an existing business which has gotten to that scale, and you're ripping something out, putting in something new. And back to that slide I had about do you do an incremental or do you do big bang? with some of the more microservices, headless approaches you can change. We're going to change our UX to be a totally headless on a different platform. Then we're going to change our cart. Then we're going to change our catalog and change the PIM and CRM and so forth. So different ways of doing it incrementally, or sometimes it has to be big bang.
All right, well, please thank Tom and Mike for that informative whirlwind session.